Welcome to this exceptional panel. Very honored to be alongside this group of people, wonderful group of people, and to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about the value proposition for location-based entertainment. And we will start with, I'm going to let others introduce themselves, and then I'll go end. So I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about yourself, your role, and obviously the company you're in and the role that that plays in the space.
Hi, I'm Selma Sabera. I'm the executive producer for Cross Reality Experiences at MEOW. MEOW is a Santa Fe, New Mexico company that builds immersive art complexes. We have about 500,000 visitors per year in our location in Santa Fe, and we're expanding to Las Vegas, Denver, Washington, D.C., and Phoenix. Right now in our current exhibit, we don't have any AR or VR. We're experimenting with those mediums for our future locations.
Hello, hello. My name is Ned Atkins. I'm right now a senior consultant at LBE News, where I help location-based entertainment companies in VR bring products to market. Just previously, actually in mid-April, I left a position at Exit Reality, which most people in the LBE space know me for. I was director of sales and strategic partnerships there, so I built out the whole kind of sales and marketing pipeline. We went from 0 to 35 locations in 6 months, from July 2018 through January 2019, and still growing. And so, yeah, I really love to build sales and marketing teams and help bring products to LBE market.
Hello, everyone. Woo, it's nice to hear. So I'm Daisy Berns. I'm the founder of LBE News and also the partnership manager for Viveport. We are at Viveport, we're really excited about the LBE industry because we're creating a cross-platform system that can be accessible to any headset so that anybody can really try it in any location. Just all about accessibility and promoting the industry further.
And I'm Pulkka, head of attractions at 2-Bit Circus. I started working in LBE VR over 20 years ago at Walt Disney Imagineering in the virtual reality studio that built attractions for Disney Quest. But now at 2-Bit Circus, we opened our first micro amusement park, has about 38,000 square feet of entertainment space, including a lot of non-XR things like arcade games and midway games or robotic bartenders, but also we have seated VR, standing VR, free roam VR, using a lot of different third-party systems and some of our own custom systems as well.
Great. Oh, you got claps.
Woo! 2-Bit Circus.
Hi, I'm Joanna Popper. I'm the global head of virtual reality for location-based entertainment for HP. I'm happy to be working with a lot of the great people on this panel and a lot of different partners that we have. So we focus on providing the best technology, the best experiences to help power many of the great experiences. And so we're working with many of you guys here, as well as other partners like Nomadic, Spaces, Zero Latency, Dave & Buster's. And so we've been lucky enough to work with a lot of the great LBEs out there, and many more announcements to come. We have a bunch of our products here that will be in the playground tomorrow. So we're excited to make sure that you guys all see the new HP Reverb, as well as our new VR backpack, which we announced yesterday.
Exciting.
Exciting.
Great, thanks guys. And I am Leila Amirsadeghi. I'm the co-founder and CMO of Onedome. We are a immersive entertainment and artist platform. And we have a 20,000 square foot space in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco, where we have the largest, well, we thought it was the largest. There's some news going around that I'm trying to find out. But the largest mass multiplayer AR experience, up to 30 people in experience at the same time. It's mixed reality. It blends the physical and the digital space. We also have, like Erin and 2-Bit, we have other installations that are digital-centric, be it immersive dining or a labyrinth of interactive rooms. But we are here to focus on the XR side of the business. So jumping into that, I mean, there's such a diversity represented here. I mean, from hardware to LBE spaces, and even in the LBE, so different between what 2-Bit and MEOW and Onedome are doing. I mean, it's a broad question, what is the value proposition? But I guess for you, when considering the value proposition, how has XR brought that value? What do you think has worked to date? What do you think hasn't worked necessarily?
One of the biggest things that has stood out as very clear winner is shared social multiplayer experiences. People come to outdoor spaces or outside spaces to be together with their friends or their family or coworkers, and they want to experience things together. So shared VR and mixed reality experiences have been super compelling.
So when we're working with venues and we're working with partners, there's a couple of different reasons that people want to bring the VR technology or AR technology into their space. And that would be, one, they think that it's going to drive additional traffic or drive incremental revenue based on the traffic that comes in, whether that's from food and beverage or something else, or that it will create a more innovative experience and increase the customer satisfaction of those who do come to the establishment, or it will be the technology is used to decrease the cost. So for example, with Dave & Buster's, they rolled out with VR Studios and a bunch of other partners a 112 location. Essentially, what they were looking at, felt like it was a roller coaster originally for Jurassic World, and now they have Star Trek and Men in Black and many other titles. And for them, for the price of what the motion simulator platform and the content, that they basically were able to create a roller coaster experience. And so while the price tag that was attached to that may have been large in some ways, it was much smaller than what it would have been to create an actual roller coaster and take the actual footprint for what a roller coaster would have needed to be. So that's what we see. It's those of us who are deep in the industry, we may be just really passionate about the technology for technology, but from the venue's point of view, from the customer's point of view, it's how are you driving additional value, which generally is increased revenue, increased satisfaction, or decreased costs.
Yeah, coming from the VR enthusiast point of view, the way that I like to see the LBE proposition really is kind of creating a channel for consumers, an everyday consumer, to really get the most premium VR experience and get that maybe out of home, and then be able to then be convinced or converted to a VR enthusiast themselves as well.
Yeah, so in speaking with a number of different FECs and trampoline parks, the things I hear again and again from franchise partners and owners looking to add location-based entertainment VR to their venues is, how do I remain competitive in my space? How do I offer something new and exciting that's cutting edge to draw in a new audience? And then once we have them in the venue, a big priority for a lot of my operators is creating a spectacle around the VR experience. Mm-hmm. So not just having a headset on the wall, but how can you really increase the design and the theater around that, so from the moment somebody looks at an attraction, you're entertaining them. So you have the spectator experience, you have the in-headset experience, and all of these things together are now providing this new cutting edge thing to an industry. Like if you look at trampoline parks, where it's like it's kind of gotten like, okay, you can go jump on trampolines, you can go to an obstacle course, but they want to add something kind of new and exciting, and VR is allowing them to add that new layer.
Yeah, for MEOW, it's interesting. We found out that people love immersive, interactive experiences. And in our Santa Fe exhibit, for the moment, we have no VR, we have no AR, and we built an experience that's immersive, and it has a story that people want to discover. It's a storytelling vehicle for us. When we experiment with mixed reality or virtual reality, we see it as an added layer to our storytelling experience, where we can expand on the narrative of that exhibit with this digital layer, as well as allow artists who contribute to our exhibits to have new mediums. And it's a big honor to be on this cutting edge of technology that can actually so seamlessly merge into art.
I think Meow Wolf is a great example of how the experience itself, it matters more than the technology. You can have an XR experience that is pretty low tech, but it's still very immersive. You're transported, there's a story to be told, and then you can blend that technology in, and the more that you do that, it does become a more compelling, enriched experience. But it's usually the last thing that we want to think about is how are we going to realize this vision? It's more, what is that experience that we want people to feel? How do we want people to feel when they come out of it? How do we want them to be able to share it? That experience is most important. And then there's all kinds of different ways that can be delivered, whether it's in a dome or in a headset or on a projection screen. And the more that we can focus that way, the better experiences come out of it.
That's great. Selma, you mentioned something that I think would be great for this panel around it's a medium for artists to be able to put work out. And it's something that we've seen, 2-Bit Circus, Park as a platform, Onedome has that, where our AR experience is effectively set in such a way where artists can contribute and it can go live and experience. So this ability to transform your business into a platform for content creators. I'd love to hear a little bit more from each of you on that subject.
So definitely MEOW has in its mission when we build a new market to integrate artists from that market into the exhibit. For example, in Denver, we have reserved 40% of the exhibit for Denver artists. And in this process, we want to make sure that the ideas from those Denver artists, whether they can execute on the idea or not, are supported by MEOW. So we are there to help them with the technicalities if the idea is there, and to introduce them to new technologies that can actually push that idea further. So it's very much not about technology, it's about that idea, and then how do we use the technology to push it further.
2-Bit Circus was born, the permanent location was born out of the idea of taking these things that would be done as work for hire projects for things like CES, where a very small audience would get to see it, but we'd leverage new technology and make a cool thing and people would get to play with it. But then the question was always what happens after that? And usually what happens is it gets dismantled and thrown away and nobody sees it again. And so instead, taking things to the STEAM carnivals before allowed kids to get to experience the same things that people saw at CES, but also see behind the curtain and see how it was built to try to inspire kids to get excited about STEM education. But that same model of being able to expose new people to these experiences that otherwise don't find a home is something that was very important in the construction of 2-Bit Circus. So in addition to the permanent attractions, we have beta nights where every month or two we invite a lot of third-party creators to come in and showcase their experiences, to get feedback from real guests in a real environment that are really drinking beer and are distracted, and that's a much more real environment to test in than in your living room with friends or even at a trade show where people are in a very controlled environment and not really just letting loose and trying to have fun. And those experiences are really beneficial for us to see what might work to bring into the park and beneficial for the creators. We worked with, just recently, Melissa Painter Design and Lululemon. We brought in their Embody experience that they had brought to Sundance and they brought it to Tribeca, but pretty much nobody else has been able to experience it.
South by Southwest.
And South by Southwest. And so that was great to be able to bring that in. It is powered by HP.
It's powered by HP. Oh my gosh.
Go figure. We have a lot of HP machines in the building. We do. And a lot. So that it's really nice to be able to take something like that that's experimental. It's not a typical game. It's not really a game at all. It's a mindfulness experience with pressure-sensitive yoga mats and body tracking. And have those kinds of things to be exposed to new audience and sort of start to test and see what will work in the future is constantly what this is all about.
Yeah. For HP, the origin story of HP was actually the two founders in a garage very near here in Palo Alto creating technology for Walt Disney. So the actual origin comes from working with an artist, working with a creative, creating. If you go, there's a whole tour at HP you can go to. You can see that first oscillator that was created. You can go to the original garage. So it was the original garage story, a founder that we've heard many of since then. So, and I think that sort of ethos or that culture of working really closely with the creatives, working very closely to make technology hand in hand that helps move both the creative work forward and move the technology forward is something that we've brought with us through these 80 years. Since then, I was not there in the beginning, if anyone's wondering. I joined a year and a quarter ago. But in virtual reality, we work really closely with location-based entertainment operators, with content creators, such as Melissa Painter that we worked with at Sundance, and we work really closely with big Hollywood studios, and work with them to understand what is it that they're working on and what is it that their creative vision is and how our technology can help power that, and then how we can continue in that roadmap of the technology and take that feedback in, and you can, because I would say we're still in our very early days, both in the industry as well as what HP is doing in the industry. So we think that partnership with the creatives that's come with us since the very birth of the company is incredibly important in virtual reality.
Something to add to that is, like, we see VR as entertaining, but there's also many other ways that we can apply the technology in an LBE venue. So there are a lot of, like, I love the platform, location as a platform, love that idea. And the way that I think about it is there's a lot of content out there that can be used in location-based entertainment venues that can actually change what that venue is. For example, there's fitness titles, and now your trampoline park is now also a fitness center. Or there's, like, educational titles, and now your venue where you have bouncy houses, you can also have classroom, like, classes and education centers. So there's a way to really diversify what your offerings.
So a lot of the venues that I work with are a little bit more traditional FECs compared to like a Onedome or MEOW or a 2-bit Circus. The FECs I work with are like bowling alley, get a pizza, play some arcade games, kind of vibe places. So as far as like me pitching it to them as a creative platform, that often doesn't really resonate with them. They'd probably look at me like, what are you talking about? So, but what I do pitch to them as far as VR and LBE is that the content is always changing. And so that obviously involves creators and be able to pull on developers to be, using VR as a channel and to be creating new experiences for these venues. But for a lot of the FECs and trampoline parks that I sell to, they are used to buying coin-op arcade machines where you have like one game and you have it for a few years and you throw it out. So with VR now, we have this amazing new value proposition where we're like, hey, look, you buy this, and then next year we're gonna have new content. The year after that, we're gonna have new content. And they're honestly confused by it to the point when I tell them the content fees after, they're like, wait, what? I have to pay again in a year? So that's something we'll probably get to later on this panel. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I think something that comes up is obviously digital is an iterative platform in itself. And it sounds like what XR is doing for location-based entertainment is allowing for more rapid prototyping and iteration on content. So you're able to test customer and user feedback quicker and not necessarily put all this money into an installation, open it up, nobody comes, and it's going to take you another year and millions of dollars to switch it out. I'm curious for those that have, even on the hardware side of things, with the traditional location-based entertainment, or even with your own venues, is how often would you change that? What's the ideal length of time to test a piece of content and see if the customers are going to adopt it?
I don't know that there is a specific time frame. It has more to do with how quickly you can determine whether it's working or not. And if it's working, then ideally it would last quite a long time. It could last years, and that would be fantastic. But it is important to quickly understand whether or not something is resonating and whether or not it's fitting with the audience, and be able to adapt it, adjust, or kick it to the curb and try again, depending on what the case may be. But I think it is true that it is much faster to be able to iterate in that kind of space. It's a lot cheaper to develop that kind of content than it is to build an entire home game. Or a lot of developers are doing now is making a game, releasing just the demo online, and then seeing how that goes. But of course, people complain it's too short, and it's hard to get real feedback based on that. Whereas an experience in LBE kind of needs to be short. I mean, you're not going out for 8 hours. Well, you might, but you're not going to do one thing for that whole 8 hours. And so you want to be able to dip in and dip out of experiences, and being able to focus on that tight, complete experience allows you to get better feedback quicker, decide if you want to go further and build it out, or if you want to bring it home and make that longer game.
Also, the audience that goes to these venues is so diverse. I mean, the at-home users really are gamers, and there is a specific type of titles that works with them, and there's a specific type of audience there. But with these LBE venues, what we've noticed and what Ned and I saw was that they really are, the age range is about 70% of the attendees are around 13 to 15 years old. And as a 13 to 15-year-old, what exactly do they want to do? So to have that little moment of R&D time in one headset that you can just switch out with all the different amazing content that's out there is really great to learn what the market wants and what the market wants when everything will be in everybody's house, hopefully coming very soon.
So when I'm testing attractions in the LB space, I'm really looking for determining for the whole attraction what the ROI is, not necessarily kind of individual pieces of content, but obviously the content's a major factor in that. And so, there's so many factors, kind of as Aaron was saying, that would influence the timeline of what I would determine to be like a successful test. You're looking at the foot traffic within the venue, the placement within the venue of the attraction. I think a lot of those factors can influence the playtesting with the content and whether or not the audience, the right number of people are seeing it and the right audience within that group is seeing it.
And I'd also say it's nice to be able to test it in stages, because you can get something up and running with just a Vive headset and some lighthouses and otherwise no real set dressing or anything, and just focus on the in-headset experience. And then once you're happy that that's going in the right direction, then you can decide to invest in more of a build out. In location-based entertainment, having more of that themed experience, that spectacle is super important, but you might not want to lean into that right away, because then, as you said, if you build out this whole space and then turns out nobody likes it, well, that's painful. So then you want to be able to adapt as quickly as possible. But out of home, you can do that. You can try at different levels and lean in on the parts that are working and pull back on those that aren't.
Yeah, I was going to say at MEOW, we're really testing with different aspects of this, because our model is, I'm going to go ahead and build out this immersive space with or without mixed reality, and then I'm going to add this layer, and how do I integrate this digital layer to the physical layer. We have found out that, again, people like to be immersed. If they're coming to the venue, then you're right, Aaron, it's a short experience because we want them to kind of try it, have some fun, and then move on to the next experience inside the venue so other people can go through the different experiences. We have been, though, testing with different vehicles for the story, whether that's in-headset content or whether it's mobile content. As well as how the story is told if you're inside the exhibit versus if you become a MEOW Wolf superfan and you start visiting the different locations, what is your experience outside of the exhibit as well, and how do you get that extra content that you might be playing at home versus the immediate content that during your visit.
Which opens up, LBE is naturally a social experience. It's get out of the house and go do things. And so it is an example of where technology actually does enable us to connect with each other and not just stay at home in a game. There's a double-edged sword there. So it's a question for not AR versus VR, but rather, one of the reasons that Onedome chose AR is because one of our mission, our vision is about connection, building connection and community. And ultimately for us, connection is eye contact. And right now, the VR headsets, you have the throughput, but you still don't see each other in the eye. I'm still looking at an avatar. So there is still a bit of for us, a disassociation. That's just in our business model. And also a throughput. Now, obviously, with Quest and with other technologies coming on that are tetherless, throughput in VR could increase. So there's sort of a couple of questions in there, and then choose your own almost, is like the social value of location-based entertainment, and then considering the technologies and how those can either further disassociate or connect people. Go.
Yeah, I was going to say for MEOW Wolf, a lot of our visitors are families. So it is a group visit. They do want the social experience. And you're right, having something that blocks your vision when you're talking to somebody else is a little bit challenging. But at the same time, if you give them a story that's compelling enough, where that content is bringing them to collaborate, it just is a different social experiment at that point.
Something fun that I learned last year at IAPA when talking to theme park architects and wondering why not a lot of theme parks had these massive VR experiences other than, like, for example, the Void, which is amazing. And they said the way that we see VR is kind of like the surfer ride. And this is something I've talked to you about before. It's really exciting. So if you've ever have you ever seen those funny viral videos where there's a fake wave and there's somebody on the wave and they're struggling and then they fall off and everybody's laughing and it's a whole spectacle. So that ride is not necessarily meant for that one person on the surfboard. That ride is meant for the entire audience sitting at the bar, buying drinks, laughing and pointing and like being so aghast at what this person is doing. So the way that these theme park architects are thinking about VR is the same way as the surfer ride. They want it to be something that they can actually sell tickets to something else for while creating a spectacle for people to look at, because watching people play VR is really funny.
Yeah, yeah, I would say, you know, a lot of the partners we work with have anything from 4 to 6 to 8 people coming together. And, you know, for the raft, for example, you know, you're working together to take down the zombies, right? You know,
The raft.
Crazy creatures.
Crazy creatures, okay,
Yeah.
crazy creatures. And, you know, there's lots of other examples, some of which are zombies, some of which are, you know, amazing creatures, you know, from our fantasies. Other ones are our actual virtual escape rooms. So you may not be in some cases you're in the same room, some cases you're not even in the same room or not even in the same location, but having to work together and interact with each other and have a different type of social connection that drives that bond and drives a new experience for many people. So I think that it's a different experience, but in some ways it can create additional adrenaline or a new memory that is something innovative and you know, a first-time experience for many people. In China specifically, one of the parks we work with is called So Real, and they have a lot of zombie and like you're fighting rats, you're fighting bugs, and they said that it's it's one of the favorite activities for date nights.
Fighting bugs.
Fighting bugs or
Bond.
So when you're trying to
trauma
figure out
bond.
what to do for your Friday night on your date, you know,
It's definitely an interesting day.
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say is, you know, it may not be looking exactly the way it looked in the past, but it's bringing us these new experiences to share with our family and friends. And definitely agree with Daisy, the surf example. You know, there's different ways that companies have achieved this. In some cases, it's mixed reality on site with you know, Mixcast or with Live. And sometimes those videos end up on YouTube, creating a much larger wave than just whoever was in that room. And you know, other companies like Sandbox, like Spaces, create your take-home video that you can put on your social, which helps them both market their experience as well as brings other people into your content experience. So there's different ways to create that shared connection and shared content experience.
Yeah, Blueprint Reality's Mixcast Moments is another good example of that. And those, being able to bring people into that experience to understand what's in the headset is super important when people haven't spent a lot of time in VR. It's really hard for them to understand that. And that spectacle experience is so important. You can look at the things that are most successful, and like Hologate does really well. It's very pretty to look at. It looks cool when people are playing. And then things like Beat Saber are super fun to watch people play. And that spectacle component adds so much. But in terms of the long term, like I think what you're doing at Onedome is super exciting with using HoloLens mixed in with the real environment, now with live actors and that whole epic immersive experience that's coming. Maybe it's a spoiler, I don't know. It's in the news, but that's super exciting. I think that blending those things together is really amazing, and I do look forward to having headsets that are lighter and cheaper and easier to clean.
So do we.
Yeah, because I think that's ultimately where we'd all love to be. The avatars are limiting. The avatars are funny in the raft, and it adds a lot to the experience, but it's no replacement for being able to see your friend's real face or your family member's face and crying out in anguish or laughing and just getting that real human connection. There's often those moments where you're like, I think I'm having fun, but I'm not sure if the other people I'm with are having fun, and I'd have more fun if they were having fun. And that sort of adds to itself. And so when you can see people's faces and you feel more grounded and you can feel like you're sharing an emotional connection with whatever's happening around you, is so amazingly powerful. But headsets do need to get cheaper and less fragile.
They do.
Yeah. Oh,
No, please.
I was just going to share. So I recently started consulting with a company called Holodeck Vr that's based out of Germany. So not Hologate, but Holodeck.
Both based out of Germany.
Yeah, they're very
And
close.
they're based in the same small town in Germany. So they have this really simple, like we call it the casual free roam, like the Candy Crush of VR. You put on a all-in-one headset, has an optical tracker on it, and you can run through like, you can get like 20 people packed into like a 33-foot by 33-foot space. The game they have on there is called Fruit Splash, and it's like a color splashing game where you don't have controllers. You literally just like look around with the headset, and then you splash fruit on the walls, and whoever gets the most splashes, the most of their team's color wins. And so what I thought was really interesting is we did an exhibit at CTX in New Orleans a couple weeks ago, and we had adults and kids go through the experience. And when adults would go through the experience, there was often like competitive nature before the experience than after the experience. And then when they got in the headset, they were kind of a little bit more like focused. You'd hear a couple shouts here and there, but in general, it was like more like focused on, okay, let's win the game. But when kids went in there, when they were in the VR experiences, when they were the most social and screaming and constantly trying to touch each other and chase each other's avatars and like just running around screaming, constantly grabbing each other. So I thought it was really interesting, like depending on the age group in the same VR experience, you can get like, it seems like a very social experience, with kids during and then versus with adults, the before and after is more important.
I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys do it as well with adding a layer of technology on top of a physical. We plan to, sometime in July, I think, launch a new, we're going to change the model a little bit where we're going to have it be more non-headset and then have it's not necessarily an upsell, but it's an additional layer. And then you'll have people in headset and non-headset roaming the space and interacting with the content. So I think that's exciting. Now that I've plugged ourselves. This takes me to content, actually, as a conversation. So when VR started infiltrating some of the traditional LBs or FECs, you started seeing a lot of the shooters, the zombies, the sort of aggressive, violent games that have been prevalent within AAA titles. Now creating a social experience and then bringing people into these scenarios and giving them guns, but it's virtual and it's fantasy. Still not necessarily, it's still promoting a certain genre. I'm curious to see, Daisy mentioned it, the surfboard experience and the visual, and it's very social. I'm curious to see, have you guys experienced, and maybe more for this side, but I'd love to know your point of view too, is what kind of content works really well? Do you feel that those are the future, or that we're moving into the more collaborative, problem-solving, fun, goofy type of experiences?
So what I think the way that the funnel kind of worked was VR was really for gamers at first, and gaming content for gamers was like, the Call of Duty and those shooters titles, so they knew that made money. So the titles that made money got the most funding, and like all those great shooter titles, which are just really wonderful, I'm saying super sarcastically, are the ones that are unfortunately ended up into the LBE space first. But then as we did more research into the LBE space, as I mentioned earlier, the audience really is much younger. And when you have a mother looking at this VR attraction that has, in a trampoline park, and then they have to pick up a gun and be blindfolded and go around like this, clicking and shooting at things, parents don't want their kids to necessarily do that. Some parents might be okay with that, and some parents are. But in my personal opinion, we're going to start leaning away from that, depending on what kind of venues we are entering into. And the content developer community out there is seeing a need for nice, easy, happy, family-friendly content. It doesn't have to be so complicated. It doesn't have to be so aggressive. Multiplayer, leaderboard, and just joy is something that the LBE, entertaining industry is looking for.
Yeah, our audience tends to skew older, but we still do have a lot of families on the weekends and things coming in. But as you said before, the audience is super diverse along every axis that you can imagine. And if we just have shooters, that's going to lead to a less diverse audience over time as people go, yeah, that's the place you go to do shooters. There's a lot of people that don't consider themselves gamers, that they don't consider themselves to be technologically savvy, and so they're just there to have fun. And that, appealing to that audience, things that are collaborative in nature tend to do better. Things that they can be competitive within that collaboration. Things like Beat Saber is a good example of that. You're not fighting against anybody. You're just trying to be better than your last time you played, or your high score of your friend. And so it's not, you can't harm the other person. And even a lot of the multiplayer experiences that we have, even the Raft is a good example of that, even though it is a shooter. But it's a collaborative one where you're not competing against the other players. And those, we need to see more of those experiences. There is a hunger for more of these things like the fruit splash, things that allow people to do something that isn't shooting.
I mean, I was going to mention Beat Saber as well, which has done obviously phenomenally well both at home and in venue. Job Simulator is another one that does well in both venues. I mean, I think in some cases, in some of the developers I've talked to around the world, one of the reasons they said they did a lot of shooters early on was because it's an easy UX, and it's, you don't have to explain it to anybody, unfortunately, and so that has had some impact. But we are certainly seeing games like Beat Saber, like Job Simulator, and some others that have done incredibly well at home and in venue. And then you have locations like Dreamscape, which all three of their current content experiences, there's no shooting in any of them. It's a storytelling experience, it's a shared experience. In one you're scuba diving, and one you're Raiders of the Lost Ark, I guess, but without without any violence, and the other one is like a fantasy dinosaur world. So I think that we do see different types of content. I think it's unfair to say you only see this or you only see that. I think that I think that we'll continue to see new and different types of content experiences moving forward as content creators and venues learn more and more about what audiences get excited about and what hits start to break out.
And the audience is going to evolve too. Right now, most people have never put on a VR headset before. Most people in the world, and I know that's hard to believe when we're here. Everybody here has put on a VR headset. But if you go into the real world, most people haven't. And so over time, that will be less and less true, and people will be willing to do or interested in doing things that take more time in the experience. That initially, when everybody puts a headset on, there's a moment of just bewilderment of where am I, what's going on, how does this work, and that takes a lot of time to get through. And by the time a lot of people get through it, the experience is over, and it's time to try something else. So it's hard to build something that's truly collaborative or constructive or creating something, because you've got to get past that, what am I doing here, and get into that longer, slower thought process. But I think over time, we're definitely going to see that. People will be more open to that, and creators will be lining up to create that kind of content.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't want to.
No, I just wanted to, just on that point is, might have forgotten what I was going to say. I'll come back to.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Wait, I forgot what. No. Okay, so.
Brain freeze.
So when you look at the old coin-op 2 arcades, right? Think old coin-op machines. The first thing you look at the arcade machine, you can immediately know what it does. It's like there's a big gun and a dinosaur. There's a racing wheel. And so I feel like when VR was first introduced to this kind of arcade and LBE market, it's already a new technology. It's like, let's play it safe and do something that we know works, which is like you have a bunch of people standing there with a big toy gun, and you know that people are going to be like, oh, cool, I want to do that. And so now that I think there's an education, challenge for us with this market in general, who, they're used to kind of this old way. Now we're kind of having to be like, okay, well, VR is a lot more than just shooters. There's a lot more diversity that you can do with this platform, and so it's just a process of both educating and then just a little bit of time for us to kind of get some revenue under our belts with some of the easy hits, and then now expand further. And then I've noticed too, with both Exit Reality and with Holodeck 2, they both stress a lot of family fun experiences, being able to not just have shooters. And as soon as you actually have some of those displayed at your booth, I noticed that in trade shows, I'd have so many people coming up to me saying, oh my God, I'm so happy you guys aren't doing a shooter, because I don't want to have any guns in my venue. Yeah. And so I've started to hear that time and time again, and I think that it's starting to catch on, and we'll see that reflected in the content.
And we know it works. If you go to an arcade, you know it works. There's very similar, like there's the whack-a-mole, and then there's the Frogger, and then so we kind of can understand from what these arcade or what these LBE venues are looking for, and you can use VR is to make it more immersive, but you can use those same mechanisms. So creating content around what you know what works isn't the biggest challenge.
And making those controllers intuitive is really important. A lot of the old school arcade games are just a joystick or a trackball and a button, and that's pretty difficult to comprehend too for somebody that's not a big gamer to walk up and go, what am I going to do with this thing? And we're kind of in that early stage where most VR setups are just 5 controllers and a headset. And that doesn't look like a steering wheel, it doesn't look like a lightsaber, it just looks like a weird contraption that most people have never seen before. And that as they get more customized, as you can theme out more of the environment, make the controllers more contextual, make that whole experience more intuitive. Accessorizing it helps a lot.
Definitely. I mean, I think what we've learned, obviously, it's not with the AR is the social learning. Even with our other experiences, it's harder with the VR, but it'll get there, is sort of watching other people do something and then being able to copy that. So I would like to offer the audience an opportunity to ask questions. I would like to end on one thing here. First, to start by congratulating Meow Wolf on your latest round of funding. 158 million last week, I believe it was, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And it brings me into an interesting point, which is investment in LBE, and we're seeing a complete shift with Sandbox breaking the norm of traditional VC, tech VC money, and dropping in 68 million to Meow Wolf, 2-Bits, done a few rounds. What do you, this might be a redundant question, but do you guys have an opinion? What do you feel is starting to loosen those purse strings a little bit and having traditional venture come into a space that has real estate attached to it, which is generally the thing that people avoid wanting to invest in? So I'm just curious, from your perspective, love to hear from Erin and anyone else, obviously, of course, what you feel is changing right now that's getting so much money being put into it.
I think for Meow Wolf, we have been very lucky where we have an exhibit that's about 30,000 square feet. It's the #1 tourist attraction in New Mexico, and it achieved that in less than 3 years. And as a startup, we actually have revenue, which even I think for Silicon Valley at times is rare. So we already have something that's showing, hey, this is making money, people love this, and they love kind of the alternative content that they're getting out of it as well. It's, you know, we all grew up on things like Disney, we're familiar with that IP, but at the same time, we get a lot of that IP. And I think Meow Wolf is something just fresh and different, and people love coming to it. It's a new experience. You can have wonderful selfies. You can have interactive experiences. We had a mom come up to us and say, I've never seen my 8-year-old son put down his phone for more than 3 hours. You guys achieved that. So that's without AR. When we look at something like mixed reality, we really think of it as this cherry on top, where we're now giving our consumers something they have been asking for, which is a more detailed narrative, a way to dive into that story more and have a fun new experience in the process. To Erin's point, we and Joanna's, we found that if we use interfaces that are more familiar, like a driving simulation, people have definitely more fun. They don't have to think about it. If I go all Meow Wolf and build something really weird where I have to explain what the hell you have to do, that's a little bit less exciting to people. So it's been some learnings in the process.
On the investment side, you know, there was investment early on, right? And some of those investors did exceptionally well. And then there was some backing off of it. You know, but I think that most of the early investment was focused on thinking that the at-home and consumer market was probably going to happen faster than it has so far. And then in some of the newer rounds, you know, if you read blog that Andreessen wrote about why they did the investment in Sandbox, and very, very sizable investment. They did specifically point to a couple of things, and some of them had to do, some of it had to do with a track record, but they also did point to the videos that I mentioned earlier about those video, that it wasn't just the specific the number of people that could come through the venue, and how fast they could scale out those venues, because that generally will not get you the 10x returns that investors are looking for, but they specifically pointed to those videos and the reach of those videos and the IP, and how they were building upon it. So I think that if you're looking for traditional VC investment in this area, which brings together technology, content, and operations and real estate, all of which individually are very risky businesses, layering all three on top, you have to be thinking about how you're still going to meet those investors' needs when most of the time they're looking at SaaS. And so how are you going to make your business as attractive as that?